nice number for now. I can't recognize chord progressions, only the melody part. What should I practice? So the best thing to practice for chords is to reharmonize the melodies that you've already transcribed. And I suggest you do this in your fixed key. So let's say your one key is C minor, which is my key. You should take a tune, like a minor melody or a major melody that's in E flat major, which is the same key, and you should reharmonize it. So imagine you're a music producer and you've been asked to do a remix of a famous song. Could be a pop song. I'm just thinking back to when I learnt this. It was the exercises where I had to do a remix of, say, the Muppets theme was one of them, and I'll play this at the piano in a future video, but I had to come up with a whole new chord progression to go with that melody. Or another one would be the Kumbaya melody. You could just take a simple melody like this and to reharmonize it using only the chords within the key. So within C minor there's only 7 chords which exist, different chord built from each of the notes, of the 7 notes. And of those 7 chords, there's actually one chord that virtually never gets used. That's D diminished, so the 2 chord of C minor scale. And really that leaves you with 6 chords. 3 of those chords are major chords, 3 of those chords are minor chords. And you should practice reharmonizing or creating a remix of a melody, because that's really how you learn how chords work, is by composition. And really, most of transcribing chords by ear is spotting the common shapes of chord progressions. And when I talk about common shapes for chord progressions, really that means the bass line, because the bass line virtually always plays the root of the chord above. So you start spotting these bass line patterns. They're kind of like melodic shapes, but they're bass line shapes. And that's how you get to know. Because there's, when there's just 6 chords that get used for most diatonic music, I'm talking about 95% of diatonic music, there's really only a limited number of patterns that you can get. And certain patterns sound better than others, so they get used a lot of the time. So just for example, a common shape in chords would be, within our key of C minor, would be G minor, A flat major, B flat major, and C minor. And there's an interval pattern to the bass line, G, A flat, B flat, C. It will go half step and then whole step, whole step. And anytime you hear that interval pattern in a bass line, that tells you what the chords are above. It's G, G minor, so G in the bass would be G minor, A flat in the bass would be A flat major, B flat in the bass would be B flat major, and C in the bass would be C minor. So I'm trying to answer this question without the piano, but basically you just have to reharmonize melodies. So take any melody that you've transcribed in your one key and then set about coming up with a completely new set of chords. It doesn't have to resemble the original in any way. It just has to use the 7 chords from the key and really the 6 main chords, which are the major and minor chords. And that's how I learnt the common shapes of chord progressions, was just by being a composer and just exploring all of the different possibilities within those 6 chords. And what you shouldn't do with learning to play chords is focusing on what a lot of my music education focused on, which was just playing isolated major and minor chords on the piano without any musical context. Really, there's not much benefit to all of these exercises where it's removed from actual music. When a teacher just plays an interval on its own, or a chord, a major chord or a minor chord on its own, or a chord played in inversion on its own. There's not much value, there's not much benefit when you practice ear training outside the context of real music. And that's kind of the reason why I'm not a fan of most ear training apps, is it's usually, from what I've seen, it's removed from any musical context. So try to practice ear training on real music. I learnt to play music by ear on real music. Beethoven learnt to play music by ear on real music, Miles Davis on real music. None of us had apps, and try to stay away from anything that's removed from real music where it's just chords or intervals in isolation. So I went on a bit there. We have quite a few questions coming in now. I can't see you. Yes, I'm sorry. This is my first live stream. I could spend the first 5 minutes trying to figure that out, but actually you don't, I mean, there's no important visual to this. It's just me in my kitchen talking to my laptop. So if you don't mind, we're going to do audio only, just while I get to know the ropes here. Let's see the next question. Do you have any advice when spotting repeated notes? It's as if I lose track of the melody, especially when the melody goes a bit fast. Any advice? It's certainly Davey, and that's from Davio. Hey Davio, thanks for your question. Fast music is certainly difficult to transcribe. I recommend, if you're trying to transcribe fast music, use some software to slow it down. I used to use Windows Media Player, and you could slow it down to 50% or 25%. There's nothing wrong with that. There's everything right with it. You know, if a song's too fast, just slow it down. And that's how I used to transcribe jazz solos by ear, was because I wanted to figure out, you know, how these jazz soloists did, you know, wrote their improvisations. So I'd slow it down to 25%, and I'd just I'd play it as many times as I needed. Repeated notes, though, I mean, they're easy to spot as long as they're within, say, 2 or 3 seconds. They were played 2 or 3 seconds ago, and then they're being played again. If it's later on in the song and it's, say, 30 seconds later, and the composer plays the same note again, then that is definitely going to be tricky. By that point, I don't really expect you to spot a repeated note if it's later on in the song, but if it's a repeated note that was played, say, 2 or 3 notes ago, then it should be fairly straightforward to spot it being played again. And the whole concept of repeated notes is that you don't have to figure out every single interval in a whole melody of a whole song from scratch. And the reality is that most songs use the same few notes and they repeat them in different patterns. So once you've figured out the notes once, you generally get a lot of transcribing from that first, you know, figuring out what the first 3 notes were. You're going to then hear those same notes over and over again. Okay, next question. What is the best ear training software? I used to use Melodic Ear. I'm generally not a fan of software or apps. I think it distracts you away from what you actually need to do, which is just listen to real music on good speakers. You know, sit in a room and just focus on your hearing. Listen to a specific song that you've chosen and listen to it on repeat, like 5 times at least, and just dedicate yourself to figuring out the notes in the melody without using your instrument, ideally. So I'm generally just a fan of using real music. You don't have to use any fancy software, no fancy apps. So I just encourage you to listen to real music and to listen to it on the best speakers or headphones that you have access to. Okay, next question. So Kerry's asking, why do I tend to call my key C minor instead of its related name, which is presumably E flat major? First reason is that naturally that's what I think. Okay, so I could talk about this one for a while, but basically I always think of it as C minor. I think more in terms of the minor scale more than the relative major scale. There is a reason for this, which is that when I'm looking at the piano keyboard, I like to view everything from the bottom note going up to the right, so that I can see everything above the note of C, if we're in our key of C minor. And if you try it the other way, if you try thinking in terms of the relative major scale, which is E flat major, well, when you have to switch, and let's say you're thinking everything ascending, which is natural for musicians. When you're thinking of harmony, you start with the bass note and then you think upwards to all the other rest of the notes and the chords. Well, if you have to then switch direction and go from E flat major and you have to recall what the relative minor is, then you have to switch direction to thinking downwards. You have to go down a minor third to find the C. And I just find it's much easier to just think in the minor scale, and then you can always see the relative major scale a minor third above the minor root note. So there is a reason for it. I find it much more efficient to just go with the lowest note in the harmony of the minor root note, and then you can see everything going on above you on the right of the keyboard, and you can always see the relative major scale, which is just there, just above you. And then there's another reason, which is later on when you get to exotic scales, which includes the modes, includes the harmonic minor scale and some other scales. You can then line all of these scales up from C. So you want to do the harmonic minor scale. Well, it's easier if you're already thinking in C minor scale. You've got the harmonic minor scale. You've got all the modes, like C Dorian is predominantly C minor scale, but with an A natural, a major sixth. Then you've got the Phrygian mode, which is predominantly a C minor scale, but it has a flat second. And yes, there are a few more major sounding modes. There's the Mixolydian mode and the Lydian mode, but the Lydian mode is rarely used. That's one of the most rare modes to hear. So most of the modes that actually get used are more minor sounding. So again, there's a lot of, it just works out nicely in the long run if you sort of think in C minor rather than E flat major. And lastly, it's what I did. I'm just recreating the journey that I went on, and it's just the way that I always thought of it as a 17-year-old. When I started focusing in on one key, in my mind I was focusing on C minor. So those are sort of three different reasons for doing so. Okay, people saying I can't see you. Yeah, I'm sorry, this is my first live stream, and I have something wrong with my webcam setup, so we're just doing audio only for now. Raven asks, how do you figure out what melody works the best with the chords you're playing, and are there any patterns that work on most songs, or do you just figure them out as you play? Let's see. So is this more of a compositional question? Well, I'm always thinking in both terms. Melody and chords are related, they're the same thing. They always come from the same notes. The melody just plays one note at a time, but the chord plays several of those notes at the same time, but they're drawn from the same set of notes, which is your scale. Sometimes I compose a melody first, sometimes I compose the chords first. That's a hard one to answer on this, but there are certainly common shapes for both melody and chords, and I'd say part of it is just learning common shapes and coming up with your own common shapes. As a composer, you want your own sort of selection of common shapes for melody and common shapes for chords. I certainly have my favorite melodic shapes, my favorite chord progressions, which I tend to gravitate towards. But apart from that, you could watch my jazz scales video, which was a recent one of the last 10 videos I posted, where I talk about the relationship between chord and scale. Let's see. There's no video, guys. Yeah. Oh, Chad. Hey, how's it going? I would appreciate a thumbs up. I'd certainly really appreciate a thumbs up from anyone who's on right now. And that's the one thing I really ask for. It just really helps me out. So thank you everyone for the thumbs ups. Where did the weird mode names come from? Good question. I don't actually know. Will you be playing in this live stream? Not for this one. This is just a discussion type. There's the next one. I would like to be at the piano. I just want to tackle one thing at a time. So I'm just getting familiar with the YouTube Live system. Hi, this is Luis. Good to see you, Luis. Familiar names for sure. Hi, how do you figure out chord extensions? What, by ear? The first step for figuring out chord extensions by ear is composing. I would suggest diatonic music using chord extensions. So you have to keep each chord within the key. So let's say we're in our key of C minor. You want to add a ninth chord. Well, it's going to be a C minor 9 chord, and that's dictated by the notes of the scale. So it's not going to be a C major 9, it's not going to be a C dominant 9. There's a few other places that a minor ninth chord, well actually there's one other place that a minor 9 chord can exist within the key, which is going to be, can you think of it within our key? It's actually going to be F minor 9. So first of all, you can start scanning the notes of the scale and seeing which chord types occur. This is extended chords with sevenths or ninths or whatever you want to focus on. There's only certain places within the key that these extended chords can exist. So there's only 2 minor 9 chords within our key of C minor. There's C minor 9, there's F minor 9. So if you hear a minor 9 chord, it's only going to be one of those 2 places. And we could go through the rest of the notes, and there's certain places where a major 9 chord could, or we could do sevenths to begin with. There's only so many places that a major 7 chord can exist. In our key, there's E flat major 7, there's A flat major 7, and that's actually it for the major 7 chords. So if you hear a major 7 chord, then it's one of those 2 places, E flat major 7 or A flat major 7. And that's the first step, is just learning where these extended chords fit within the notes of your key. Now, the next question you're probably wondering is, what about when I look at some jazz song or something that has lots of modulation in it, and I see, say, a minor 9 chord, and it doesn't seem to be one of those 2 places? Well, the reason is that that jazz song is modulating, it's changing key, but while it's within that key, the minor 9 chord will be one of those 2 places. It will either be the root of the minor scale, so C minor 9, or it will be the 4 chord of the minor scale, which is F minor 9. So the only extra thing is that there's modulations, there's key changes, which can distract you from this. But to start with, I would just focus on scanning the notes, the 7 notes of the key. Let's say your key is C minor. Well, there's only 7 chords that you can build, and start noticing what types of extended chord you can build within the key, and that's the first step. And then I'd also encourage you to reharmonize just simple melodies within your key, and to use extended chords, and to stick with the extended chords that are found within the key. So that would be my first step for extended chords. But I will say extended chords comes later. The first step is to get really strong at identifying the diatonic common shape chord progressions, which is just using 3 note chords. And again, that goes back to the first question, which is just to reharmonize simple melodies within your key using just the 6 chords within the key, which are major and minor chords. Okay, let's see the next question. Okay, Emil says, so let's say you need to learn a song really fast and you know the key of the song and have an example. Will you then first transpose it back to C and then back again to the original? So it depends on the context. If it's for your own playing, you're playing a solo piano piece, personally I would just figure it out in my 1 key of C minor, E flat major, and I wouldn't ever play it in the actual key of the original song. That's just my personal preference. The only thing would be if you're playing with a singer who has a vocal range that's within a certain range and the original key works better for them, then that would be the only reason I would figure it out in the original key. It's not going to hurt you playing songs in other keys, it's just you're not going to learn how harmony works from those songs, if that makes sense. So it's not something you have to avoid. I still have repertoire that's in different keys, but I would say 80% or more, actually probably 90% or more of my songs or my repertoire are all within my key, and that's certainly all of my transcribed songs by ear. So yeah, generally, and this goes beyond just transcribing music. This is any new harmonic thing that you're going to learn, whether it's a melodic shape, a chord voicing, a new scale. I line everything up from C. So even if I discover this new sound in a different key, well, the first thing I'll do is I'll transpose it to start from C, and I'll memorize it from C. So I have all of my chord voicings memorized from C. That includes major so major 7 voicings lined up from C, so C major 7, minor 7 voicings lined up from C, minor 9 voicings lined up from C, dominant 7 voicings lined up from C, and that's why I have a very sort of crystal clear picture of how harmony works. Is I go to the trouble of transposing everything so that it starts from C, and then later on you can just transpose it out into different keys, but everything's organized in your head. Carlos. Nobody ever answered this question well for me. What should you visualize in your mind when you transcribe? The staff, the keyboard, my fretboard, numbers, arrows, what? That's a great question, Carlos. Certainly not staff paper. What I visualize is the piano keyboard, and in my mind it's a sort of 3D image with, you know, the black notes are higher up and the white notes are lower down, and I visualize myself playing every note. In fact, when I first started transcribing songs by ear, I found myself sort of playing air piano a lot, you know, like air guitar but air piano, and that was a habit I had to sort of learn not to do in public, but that's kind of what I do. I often sort of feel myself playing with my fingers the notes, and I'm certainly visualizing the piano keyboard. And one other thing that I'm thinking, when I visualize the keyboard in my mind, really it's just a set of interval patterns. So within our key of C minor, it's a set of interval patterns, and it's not just whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. It's not just the scale ascending, it's also the interval between every single note in the scale. So I know where the 2 tritones are within C minor. It's D to A flat and A flat to D. I know where the 2 half steps are. It's D to E flat and G to A flat. I know where all the whole steps are, where all the fifths are, where all the minor sixths are. And this is ascending and descending. So when I picture the piano keyboard in my mind, it's this huge sort of spider web of intervals. And yeah, and I know where all the major sevenths are. And so that's what I visualize when I listen to music, is the piano keyboard, especially within the key of C minor. And yeah, I don't visualize numbers because numbers are kind of abstract, and I definitely don't visualize the staff paper. So yeah, I hope that one helps. Okay, any more questions? Let's see. 400 pounds Chilean windsurfer says, "Hey Julian, thanks for all the help throughout my years, man." That means a lot. It's my pleasure, it really is. I'm having the time of my life making these videos, so thank you. Oh, Miles is saying the mode names come from the different regions of ancient Greece. Interesting. Let's see. So if you're just joining, I'd really appreciate a round of thumbs ups. That's really the one thing that really helps me out. Let's see, air piano, yes, lots of air piano. And it's just a sign, I mean, jokes aside, it's just a sign that you're truly immersed in music. You're thinking about it, you're trying to play piano when you don't have your piano with you. I think it's a very healthy thing to play some air piano. Let's see, Paul Mills. I ask, as I tend to get in a rut when I play with triads and seventh chords, you seem to alternate bass lines with open voicings. I think I know what you're talking about. I play a lot of root and fifth voicings in my left hand. It's just a very clean voicing, doesn't really specify whether the chord's major or minor. I do play that voicing often, especially for sort of diatonic pop songs, if I'm playing a sort of simple song by ear. I just don't like the simple sound of a major triad like C, E, G, or a minor triad C, E flat, G. I like playing root and fifth voicings, and sometimes if you can stretch it, you play root, fifth, and third. So the third is sort of an octave higher. Do you think about chords when you improvise? Sometimes it seems to me that soloing more natural to me when I don't think about chords and try to play only what I hear in the moment. I'm a guitar player. I always think about chords. In fact, chords are everything for me because chords tell you what the harmony is. I think about chords first, yes, and for me, chords and melody aren't this separate thing. They're really the same thing in many ways. They're the same group of notes, but chords play all of the notes at the same time, whereas the melody plays one note at a time, but really they come from the same place. So yes, I always think about the chords. I never play anything without knowing what the chord is first. Chords are the chords are more important than whatever you play on the melody, I'd say. They come first. What about to sing the bass line? Do you have some tips? Yes, I do. And just in case you're joining me, this is ear training questions. We don't have image today. This is just a trial run. So to sing a bass line, okay, so to transcribe bass lines, first thing is to make sure you're listening to music on good speakers or good headphones where you can hear the bass line clearly. One of the sad things in the last, I'd say, 10 years is that speaker systems have just got worse and worse, to the point now where it's actually quite hard to find a sort of CD player or, you know, traditional sort of thing that you can listen to music on that has good bass. And you see these, you know, I went to Best Buy recently just to try and get a good speaker system just so we could listen to Christmas songs. And there's this huge gap in the market now where if you want something that actually has good bass, then you have to buy like some $400 thing. So first tip is to make sure you're listening on good speakers, you know, not laptop speakers, not phone speakers. And then bass line, in some ways it's simpler than a melody because there's less notes. Usually there'll just be, say if you have a 4-chord progression, then there'll be 4 bass notes. But it's more difficult in some ways in that it is low down, so it's outside your sort of your ears, most sensitive to the sort of mid-range where it can hear very clearly. So it's outside that range, and let's see, yeah, and sometimes the intervals that it moves by are bigger than melodies. So yes, melodies rarely jump beyond a fifth, but bass lines quite often do jump beyond a fifth. You will hear minor sevenths, minor sixths. It's more a case of learning the common patterns, and really it's related to the common chord progressions, because the way you identify chords by ear is by transcribing the bass line. So the common chord progressions are also common bass line patterns. So earlier I gave an example which was G, A flat, B flat, C. If you hear those bass notes within our key of C minor, then that is a common pattern, and it indicates that the chords are G minor, A flat major, B flat major, and C minor. So really it's a case of doing the main exercise which I've talked about today, which is reharmonizing melodies using chords within the key, and it's going to be the 7 chords that you find within C minor scale. 3 of those chords are major, 3 of those chords are minor, and I'd ignore the 2 chord which is D diminished because that rarely gets used. So start by composing your own chord progressions and playing the root of the chord in the bass line, and pay more attention to the bass line patterns than the chords above. So that would be my advice to help with chords. To help with bass lines, sorry. Let's see, next question. Let's see. Do you have any specific methods for practicing improvisation? How would you approach a 12-bar blues improvisation, for example? To relate it to my one key, I would practice within your one key that you're most confident with, and then every lick and melodic idea that you add is already lined up within your one key, because you're then going to use that on future improvisations. And so I do a 12-bar blues. Personally, it would be within the key of C minor, so C minor, F minor, C minor, then G minor, F minor, C minor, and add sevenths to those chords. And you'd use the C minor blues scale. Another thing that's really good is if you sing the notes as you play them, because really the main the main thing with improvisation is you're meant to be hearing the notes before you play them, rather than the other way around. You're not meant to be just thinking, okay, this is my scale. If I play any of these notes, it's going to sound fine. It's more a case of sort of singing every day. So say you want to really focus on improvisation, then you should get in the habit of just singing to every piece of music you listen to and making this a habit. And yeah, and then when you're playing at the instrument, also get into the habit of singing the notes at the same time that you play them, because really you could learn all of the improvisation techniques in the world, but the most important thing is going to be the ear training element, which is learning to sort of hear the notes in your head before you play them. So those would be 2 tips: to line it up within your one key, and to sing the notes as you play them, and also to just sing every day, sort of when you're away from your instrument. Get in the habit of this sort of imagining you have to solo over any pop song. It doesn't have to be just jazz. And to get in the habit of sort of singing and composing on the spot. So yeah, those would be some tips. Chad asks, any good thoughts about borrowed chords as they relate to voice leading and vice versa? Borrowed chords meaning parallel mode chords, not really ear training based. Not many thoughts that I can demonstrate without the piano. I do like shifting modes as a compositional technique. For example, you can shift between the Dorian mode and C minor scale. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to give a good answer though without the piano. So I'll go to the next question. Any recommendation for good speakers or headphones? Headphones, I use AKG headphones. I think the model is 235 or something. They cost about $200, but it's well worth getting good speakers for whatever you're listening to. Good speakers, I mean, it depends. I use KRK Rocket 5s, but that's because I'm doing proper mixing. If you just want something that's kind of, for your family to just listen to music to, I don't know, I'm still in the process of looking. So yeah, no models. But make sure you listen to it in the shop, ideally. Take in some CDs that you know well, you know how they're meant to sound, and listen to it on the shop. I wouldn't just order something online without listening to it. Just going to take a break for some water. Okay, when playing in C minor, do you change the 5 chord to major so it leads back to 1? I hear some people do that. Okay, Miles, that's for harmonic minor music. That's a more sort of classical sound. Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, if they were writing songs in the minor scale, they would use the harmonic minor. Some modern day pop examples would be Survivor by Destiny's Child. It's got this more grandiose sound. Another example would be Stevie Wonder's I've gone blank, but the Gangster's Paradise. Someone's going to type it in now. Or the Coolio remake. That's another. Someone's going to type it in. What's the Stevie Wonder song that got made into Gangster's Paradise by Coolio? It's something Paradise, I think. Yeah, no video today. Sorry, this is my first one. Just learning the ropes here. Next one will have video, and then maybe the one after that will have piano as well. I'm just introducing one thing at a time. Let's see. So Miles, in C harmonic minor, then the 5 chord is going to be G major. And the nice thing, when you get to the stage where you've really mastered the diatonic music, you can basically transcribe every piece that's in C minor. Well, the extra scales, like the modes, like the Dorian mode or the harmonic minor, they just add on a few little tweaks to what you already know. So a lot of the common shapes for C minor scale carry on over to harmonic minor music. So if we take the shape I talked about recently in melody, which is C, E flat, F, G, and going the other way as well, well, that is a common shape in the harmonic minor as well. It's also a common shape in the Dorian mode as well, all lined up from C. So yes, that's another sound, C minor going to G major. That is from the harmonic minor scale. Oh yeah, Pastime Paradise. That's it for sure. That's the Stevie Wonder song that's in the harmonic minor scale. Okay, let's see, next question. Let's see. Raven asks, I'm working on this project and I'm supposed to compose a short jazz improvisation for all the white keys. I want them all to show very different emotions. Do you have any tips? By all the white keys, do you mean all of the modes built from all of the different scales, like D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, B Locrian, C Ionian, and I think I said D Dorian? Or do you just mean, because what do you mean by white keys? Do you mean major and minor scale keys, or all of the modes as well? Generally, I'm not a fan of anyone who, to learn the modes. I never think it works to line up every scale as all the white notes starting from each white notes. So people who say, oh, Dorian mode, that's just D to D, all the white notes, or Phrygian mode, that's just E to E, all the white notes. I don't think anyone learns the modes on nearly as deep a level when they do it that way. I'm a fan of lining them all up from C, so C Lydian, C Mixolydian, Beast mode has been commented, I don't know what that's about, C Dorian, C Phrygian, C Locrian, etc. I think that's how you truly learn the modes, because you get them all lined up. So it's kind of like if you ever watch a 400-meter race and they have the staggered starts as they run around the track. So you can't really see who's winning the race until the last 100 meters, when they're actually lined up in parallel, and you can see who's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whereas if you learn, and that's basically what you're doing when you line up all the modes from C. You can see all the differences. You can see, oh, the Lydian scale is the major scale, but it has a sharp 4, or the Mixolydian scale is the major scale, but it has a flat 7. And it's very neat to sort of line them all up, and you can just see the differences between them all. Whereas if you learn them as white notes starting from each of the different notes, well, they're not lined up together. And it's my experience that anyone who does it that way doesn't really ever scratch the surface of how much you can explore these modes or how much you can understand them. So usually I'd recommend you compose a different song in each mode, but to line them all up from C. So C Lydian, C Mixolydian, etc. Wow, 74 people online. It's going up. I agree with your stance on the modes from Miles. Thanks, Miles. That's just what worked for me. And if you want to learn the modes, a really good exercise is to take a simple melody, like I remember using Kumbaya, da, 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 and to do a modal variation on that melody. So do a Dorian mode variation, da, 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 where you have a minor triad and then a major sixth. Do a Lydian variation, do a Mixolydian variation, do a Phrygian variation, all lined up from C. And that's how I really learnt the modes, as I did these variations of Christmas songs and just simple songs like Kumbaya. So that's a good thing to practice. Let's see. Is Davio, I think I'm saying it right, or maybe it's David, is hearing rhythm signatures anything related to time basically a part of your course? The musical ear course, not currently, but I do have plans to add a few lessons on unusual time signatures and actually common time signatures as well. But really there's so much content to cover on the pitch side of things, and it always was my plan to do some stuff on rhythm, but really, no, it focuses on the pitches and the harmony. But yeah, down the line, I do plan to add a few lessons on unusual time signatures, but not currently. Someone asked me who's my favorite classical composer. Shostakovich was always close to my heart growing up. More so when I was a teenager, probably because it's so dark, but it's so he has such a unique sound world. And within the famous composers, there's still a hierarchy. It's not like they're all equal. It's not like Beethoven is equal to Brahms, who is equal to Mozart. You know, they're not all equal. There's still a hierarchy within the famous names that you hear about. And I think that Shostakovich was just on a whole new level to sort of almost most of the famous musicians. So for me, Shostakovich. But then I also like John Adams a lot, sort of contemporary minimalist music. So I was really into minimalist music, people like Steve Reich, John Adams, Philip Glass for some of his work. But really, John Adams is very interesting music, both harmonically and rhythmically. Let's see. I'm trying to introduce my friends to classical music. Any tips how to make them like the music? No tips. You can't really force music on people, probably. It's something that you might get into as you get older. You know, they say no one can understand a Beethoven symphony until they're over 50, which probably just means you have to have gone through some, you know, life lessons and things. I don't think you can really force music on people. I mean, there's a time and a place for different styles of music. I think classical music works really well in the morning. You know, if I go to a coffee shop and they're playing classical music, I think it works really well in that situation. But yeah, no real tips, I'm afraid. And if you're joining here, this is just ear training questions. Wow, it's gone 47 minutes. I was really prepared to just end this at 20 minutes or less because I thought it might be a complete failure. If you're enjoying this video, I'd really appreciate a round of thumbs ups. That's the one thing that really helps my channel out. Let's see some other questions. And this is predominantly ear training questions. I don't have a piano set up today. So John Cook asks, when you hear a melody and recognize the tonic, do you treat that as a C note and then notate the melody in C, even though the melody may actually be in another key? Yes, I'm not bothered with what key the actual original is in. You know, it has to be in one of the 12 keys, but apart from that, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the key to me is just an interval pattern. It's not like there's 12 different keys to me. To me, there's just one key, and we can rebuild that interval pattern from any of the 12 notes. So yes, when I hear a melody, and if I recognize the tonic, then I assume that that is C, even though I know if I tried it out at the piano, it probably wouldn't be a C. So any more ear training questions, people? I'm just going to take a drink of a glass of water. Let's see. Alan Philippe says, I can recognize... Oh, Chad, thank you. Not a failure at all. That means a lot. I'm really enjoying this, by the way. I'm definitely going to do more of these. Alan Philippe says, I can recognize solfege notes fairly well in an isolated context, single melody. But when there's an underlying harmony, it gets more difficult. Any tips? Should we have the tonic in mind all the time? I'm not someone who listens to music trying to hear the tonic all the time. That's never been something I do. Isolated context, so that means, I guess that means playing notes on a piano without any harmony. This comes back to my whole, this is like the cause of most sort of misconceptions and like ineffective teaching methods, is when people have you transcribe outside a context of real music. For example, just playing a melody on its own without chords, or just playing an interval on its own without chords, or just playing chords on their, or like a single chord. All of these practice things that it just doesn't bear any resemblance to actual transcribing. So that's why I'm all about learning to transcribe on real music. So just listen to your favorite music and to practice on that rather than doing the isolated stuff, which a lot of, say, apps do. They just play an interval on its own outside any context. So I would really encourage you to just do all of your practice on real music and to stay away from anything that's, just a single isolated chord or interval or melody. That stuff, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not very effective because it's a very different thing to actually listening to real music. And just one example of that is if a common way to teach people with chords is to just play a single chord on its own, like a major chord, a C major chord, or a minor chord, C minor chord, and to ask the student, does this sound major or minor? Well, if you listen to real music, say diatonic music, any pop song, you should listen out for how the chords sound, because do they sound major or minor? They really don't sound major or minor in the way that it sounds if you play it outside any tonal context. If you just play a C major chord on the piano, then yes, that sounds major. But if you just play But when you actually listen to real music, like diatonic music, and you listen within our key of C minor, for example, if you play a few chords within C minor and then you play a B flat major chord, well, ask yourself, does this sound major? And it doesn't. It just has its own color, and it's not major or it's not minor. The music as a whole will probably sound minor. It will either sound more like it's in C minor, or it might sound like it's more in E flat major. But the chords themselves don't really sound major or minor. So there's not much benefit to trying to learn the sound of a major chord or a minor chord. And I'd encourage you instead to try and reharmonize simple melodies using chords from the key and to pay attention to the bass line patterns. And that's really how you learn the chords. You learn the common shapes of basically the best sounding chord progressions within the 6 chords that tend to get used within the key. So I might have gone off topic there a bit. Let's see, isolated context. Yeah, basically focus on real music. You don't need any special gear other than good speakers or headphones. And try to avoid practicing on isolated intervals or chords. Let's see. Next question. Is there an easy order to watch your videos? I'm sorry, there's not. But if you're new to jazz, then my complete introduction to jazz is probably the best place to start. Tino, I can't see you. I'm sorry, this is an audio-only transmission. This is my first one. I have the webcam set up, but there's quite a few bits of software going to do this stream, so I guess we're just doing audio only today. Let's see, next question. Do you have any beginner songs to transcribe? I would recommend Christmas songs, certainly because it's the time of year right now. That's what I started on. Simple children's songs, basically diatonic music is where you want to start. Pop songs, electronic music is very clear to hear. I learnt a lot in the early days just from listening to electronic dance music at age 17, and sort of the more electronic produced songs are very clear to hear the bass line, the piano chords, and the melody, and it's just produced very clearly, so it's easier to sort of hear the notes compared to, say, guitar-based music, where it can be quite, strummy. The chords are voiced as power chords often, where there's no third played, and so generally I'd encourage you to stick with diatonic music, electronic sort of pop music, if you're okay with that, and just generally simple melodies like Christmas songs or children's songs. Let's see. Kerry says, why do you use retuning on your instrument? I don't use retuning on my instrument. No, I just switch. I use a Roland RD700SX and I just switch it on. I don't tune it in any different way. So it should be at concert pitch for my videos. Okay, here's a question. I can identify some of the melodic intervals through drills and such, but when they come in real music, I try to transcribe, I can't recognize them easily. What should I do? Keep practicing. This probably comes back to the main theme of this live stream, which is that it's a different thing to identify intervals outside any musical context compared to listening to real music. The main thing is to practice singing intervals. That's the best way you can practice identifying intervals. It's sort of the same skill if you can sing intervals. So I would practice singing the 6 priority intervals, which is all the intervals up to a fifth, excluding the tritone. And I'd focus on singing them ascending only. Let's see. Alan Philippe says, okay, thanks, it makes sense. Okay, that's great. Tips for transcription without the use of an instrument. So I always, recommend that you work towards transcribing away from your instrument, so you do it all in your head. That's not necessarily the very first step. If you're really new to this, it sort of depends what stage you're at with your instrument, but if that's too much to ask to begin with, then do your first 10 melodies using your instrument, just to get the ball rolling. That's something I've started to say lately, because some people, then it's too much to tackle to go straight to just doing it all in your head. So if you're not at that stage yet, then it's fine to start by using your instrument to transcribe. Do your first 10 melodies using your instrument, where you just do trial and error and sort of fumble through the wrong answers. But yeah, then once you start getting the hang of it, you want to start doing it without your instrument. Main tips for transcribing without your instrument would be listen to the song as many times as you need. Don't test out your answer until you have a clear answer where you can sort of visualize all of the notes. And I would listen to at least the first 3 or 4 intervals, try to figure out the first few intervals of the melody, and then I would look at the notes of C minor scale, if that's your key, and I'd figure out where do those intervals fit within that key. Because if you have a half step in your melody, for example, well, that instantly narrows down where the melody could be. It can't be C to D anymore, because it would be C to D flat, and that would take you out of key. It can't be F to G, it can't be all of these different places. It can only be 2 places, which are D and E flat, or G and A flat. So I would start by using that approach, try to identify a few intervals in a row, and then scan the notes of the scale to see where those intervals fit. Kerry says, sometimes you spin a knob and it said you are changing key. I don't think that's me. I think that might be someone else's video. Because I know what you mean by the sort of, you can spin a knob and it changes the key of the piano. I don't have that kind of Roland piano. And in the musical ear, I do use the transpose button just to simulate the real world. So I'll, as you listen to the exercises, which are real world songs, just me playing them on the piano, it will actually be in different keys, but then we'll always transcribe it back into C minor. Miles says, I don't think I've ever seen him do that. I think that's someone else. Isabella says, I'm having trouble getting started with jazz piano. Is there practices that I can do to really wrap my head around chords and chord progressions? I would focus on the 2-5-1 in both major and minor scales. So the 2-5-1 is really 2 different chord progressions. There's a major 2-5-1 and a minor 2-5-1. And 80% of jazz is just the 2-5-1. You get it in different combinations. Sometimes you just get a 2-5, sometimes you just get a 5-1, and then the music modulates somewhere else. But really, if you look at the chords on a chord sheet, then it's really all 251 based. So I would focus on those 2 chord progressions to begin with, and I did a video on, I think it's called 251s Explained once and for all, so that would be a good starting place. Okay, we're at the 1 hour mark. I've had a wonderful time doing this. My voice is starting to go. So you know what though, you can go ahead and continue to post an ear training question, or if it's not an ear training question, just post the exact video that you would like me to make next. So, and I'd like the title, so just tell me what would be the ideal title of a video. If I could make you one, oh, you're welcome, Isabella. I'm glad that helped. So if I could, one sec, sorry, alarm's going off. So if I could make just one video for you, what would the title be? And then below that, just do a sort of quick description of what it would cover. And after I end this live stream, I'm going to go through the comments and I'm going to read them, and I'm going to make a list for my upcoming videos. So I'd love if you could just go ahead and comment with the one video that if I could make you would really help you out. Apart from that, I would love a final round of thumbs ups. I really appreciate all the thumbs ups. And if you want more information on ear training, you can look at some of my recent everyday ear training videos on YouTube. There's a lot more of those to come. And you could go to themusicalear.com, where I've got my free ear training video series. I've also got a new series of email tips, which is a 10-week sort of weekly email system where it sends you these challenges. All of which will sort of take you on the exact journey that I went through when learning to play music by ear. You know, we start with some Christmas songs and we work our way up to chords and then bass lines. So those are over